Hello, everyone. I am back at it in my office. I've been doing my podcast in the pickup the last few times, and well, that's all great fun. Sometimes I just don't want to do it that way. Anyways, me again, your host, Nathan Felighty, with this lovely day. It's a rainy day. I actually made another podcast episode for next week in my pickup. And more on that. I'll say I'm not sure if I'll actually put that as my podcast or if it's just kind of a special edition. Because before I get into what I want to talk about, I do have some general personal news changes that I'm looking into. Let's just say that. If you look at a recent my latest video meme on LinkedIn, read the comments that I put down. Actually, most people on the videos, it's weird. They just like them because they don't pop up the same way they used to on LinkedIn, where you'd see the text and then you just kind of see the video. Now it's like this whole TikTok, Reels, Shorts kind of format where you're just flipping through. So sometimes the content you put towards the video, beyond the video itself, which is kind of the point, I get it, gets missed. So if you want a little showcase into what I'm thinking there, go ahead there if you're actually listening to this. I'll mention it naturally in the newsletter a little bit. Let's just say I'm shifting away from my, I'll call it semi-independence, and looking for a larger adventure. Now, what that exactly means is a lot up in the air right now. A lot of conversations starting to happen, and there's more to it than just me. I'll say that. So I'm in a unique situation with my history and my thoughts and all these connections and time and people I've known and systems and whatnot, and even my own stuff, from the family company and things of that nature. So anyways, look for that. There's a little just general thought process. But also, because of all this history and time in the software, AgTech industry, hardware's tied into that, and with all the OEMs, input companies, FMIS, you name it, just everything in the precision AgTech world. There's something that I kind of wanted to bring up more, and it kind of came in. I've seen in various versions. So here's the heart of this week's newsletter and podcast, which is really farmers versus programmers. You could call it farmers versus software. You could call it ag versus programmers or developers, whatever. Either way, it's kind of this, user versus developer of systems, of things that people use. Clearly all the stuff we use here, the computer I'm on right now, our cell phones, the apps we use, the whatever, you name it. There's this giant dichotomy between the two. Because, you turn on your phone and some app's not working, it's clunky, you're in a software, maybe you're trying to do your taxes, heck, or, just trying to sign into a streaming account. Something doesn't fit right and a button doesn't work, and, it pauses and the spinning wheel of death happens and you're like, oh my God, why can't they figure this out? Oh, they're terrible. They don't know how to do their job. And then, support people have to answer questions like, well, we don't know what's going on. There's a glitch, there's always a glitch. And, we all get it. We've all kind of dealt with it, at least from the consumer side. If you've never worked with actual software developers and kind of get how that all works, even, from managing them to helping produce a product that they need to create, to helping a dev team, to illustrating these visions and ideas, to marketing what is built, to supporting what is built, to selling what is built. I'm not a software developer myself. What's stupid is I have kind of this architecture engineering brain. That's what I was going to do. That's what I first went to college for, and then I switched things up more towards ag, and then that's a whole nother story. But I should have got into programming. Like I sometimes, it's one of my biggest regrets of not diving into it deeper. Of course, now with all the advent of AI and all this stuff, yeah, maybe I won't have to. Maybe no one will have to in the future here. That's awesome and scary all at the same time, because then everyone becomes that. But I will say this 100%, at least in this moment in time, I don't see AI programming and agentic programming, whatever you want to call it. There's tools out there that can do some cool things, or what, vibe coding, I think that's what they call it. I don't see that solving all the world's problems when it comes to software development and code development. Just as much as that, I don't see it happening with agronomy. And it's not that it can't augment the process. It does augment the process now. There's proof in the pudding from, Google and beyond that they are reducing staff in certain areas because some of these AI processes help greatly. Now, a lot of it has to do with just testing and not having to necessarily recreate a process over and over. It's these other smaller parts to it. It's not necessarily the core creation of something new out of it. It's more supporting that process. Just as much as it can work in ag. You're not going to necessarily remove the ag banker, but you can maybe cover a lot more with one person versus, traditional, which you might mean 10. I can see the same in, crop insurance and other, agronomy even. It's like, I'll have a perfect example of this. There's a guy I know up in Canada. Many people know his name. He's kind of a legend agronomist up there. But he worked with a company that we were, they were using satellite imagery to do zone testing and all that. Well, the method before was composite sampling, all these things up and down the field. You couldn't really focus. There's a limit on the amount of acres you could do. I'll call it, 50,000 acres for how it was going then. Because you're just kind of going in, maybe you could call it gridding can happen this way. But with the advent of technology, from GPS to mapping from satellites or whatever other map you're using, he could cover. Yeah, I think he did 200,000 acres himself one year, 250. It was something crazy. One guy, his own soil testing in Western Canada. That's an insane amount. If you actually put the dollar amount, if he did it all himself, he was with a group doing it. And they were charging $10 an acre, and there's other, there's recommendations and all that from it, but the actual job of soil testing, call it, I don't know, $3 an acre. Oh, that's a lot. That's $750,000. That's due to some technology side. So where I'm getting at it is with tech, it's helping people do more with less. Where the AI stuff is. Now, to my really original kind of talk here with, farmers versus developers or programmers, we get caught in this. They get caught in this. The middle ground gets caught in this. And there was a recent post I saw last week, and I've seen others like this, where someone's complaining about, farm management software X doesn't work this. It doesn't do the way the farmer XYZ, it's confusing, blah, blah, blah. It costs this, all this. It's like, if they just would have brought a farmer in earlier to talk to him about, what they should build and how it all works and all this, it would be better, and now these groups have failed and they've, whatever, they suck and AgTech is the worst. I mean, don't get me wrong. There is truth in that nugget of complaining about it. That is true. Or it could be from the business model perspective. It doesn't have to be just programming, but that also guides kind of what the whole business model becomes too, is how the tech works at times. So this old argument that, in the tech world of ag, precision ag as well, if just more people in ag were involved earlier, everything would be better. Well, fun fucking fact, that was always the case. Literally. That's always been a thing. Okay? It has. From, my early days, and you're always out there trying to talk to farmers and people in ag saying, hey, what do you think? How should this work? This has always been done. There's a fallacy that hasn't been a thing. Now, yes, certain groups probably did worse at this, clearly. And I think some of this anger around it comes from probably the push of all the money that started coming into the industry around tech, and a lot out of Silicon Valley, and maybe they just talked to ag people in California because it was right next door in the valley there, and then like, oh, we this will work for corn farmers or work for soybean wheat farmers, whatever. When I mean, sure, that was done. It still is done to some extent today. It's gotten better. But here's the other side of the coin. If you're asking a farmer what they want, or an ag service provider what they want with tech, with software, or some sort of analytics or process, they can say what they want. Building that and supporting it and all of the other pieces to that is not just easy to do. Even with all the new things coming out there, and there's base processes from open source stuff that can kind of come in and help. That doesn't always help. Like a lot of the times, and I dealt with this all the time, is I could put the farmer cap on and I'd interact with people in ag, so I knew what they inherently wanted. Some stuff I just like, hey, I'd love to build that, but that's gonna take us 6 months, and then takes away from this. But there's assumptions like, well, you can just build it. It's just a button. It's just a click. I see a website and someone put that up in a couple of days. It's just not much different. It's like, well, there's all these back-end databases and different programming languages, and then it's got to fit here, and then you got to log in. There's user, verification and all this fun crap. They don't get that part. There's all this back-end help with it. And so while the argument exists is like, oh, you just should have brought more ag people in earlier. And sometimes I've even complained about that myself, because there's truth to that. Some should have done it a little better. I think the people that are on that side would probably agree, like, yeah, we probably should have done it a little better if the things weren't working out quite the way they were. At the same time, so a lot of people in ag don't know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to developing these tools. Yes, they can be a guide to maybe how the design, the UI UX of a thing is, or the usability of it. Sure. Sometimes the usability can't be great right away just because of technology limitations and the money it takes to create them. And this is what a lot of people in ag don't get, because ag inherently too is built off the adages, I can do it myself, I can build it myself, I can fix it myself. And that's becoming more and more of a problem. So maybe that's actually what's happening, is there's this build up of tech within, the equipment under OEMs, with how chemistries are created and what you can and can't use, all these different rules around those things, rules around, flying a drone in a certain place, or how data is shared, and things like that. When in the past it was like, well, I'll just do it. I'll just buy this, I'll put it in a tank, and I'll spray it, and it's fine. I don't have to really worry about it. I could select the one chemical and put it out. That was like that was the whole thing about Roundup. It's like you just need one chemical and go out and spray it, and it's all done, and it's great. Well, then other problems started coming out, and they had to create newer chemistries of it, and then I had to mix it with other things because of resistance. The same thing happens in tech. New processes come up to make a software process better. You're always kind of updating it in various ways. Now, what's funny is even in the software world of agriculture, for a while, that wasn't necessarily as much of an issue. There was a lot of the software was kind of embedded just on the computer. Put in the CD or download the package, and here's your software. And that latest version always pretty much worked very well. The only time you needed updates were for there's odd little bugs that can happen, but for the most part, those always got flushed out. And so the update was more for an update with a new feature or something. And so a lot of people got used to that. It's like, well, that old version always worked. That version of SMS always worked. That version of FarmWorks always worked. Why can't I have that? That monitor always worked. It always did its thing. But that's not how tech has evolved. It's changing on the go dynamically, more or less. And so your updates aren't like some giant new version. Now, some of that still exists, but it's kind of just it just comes up, and then people are known like, hey, there's this new thing, but it's been there actually for a while. You just never knew about it, or there's a new back-end process that makes things 10% faster. And the users of these systems in ag don't really see that or understand what it takes to do that. Some of those processes might have taken an evolution of years to get to that point to make it that much faster. But then they don't see these other back-end connections of how that got there. So in a sense, when people in ag bitch about technology and how it works, I kind of want to say, well, no, F you, because what are you doing to try to understand the other side of it? What are you doing to try to understand how complex these things are to build, how expensive they are to build, how much time and effort in finding the right people it takes to build these things? And they don't try. Now, the tech side of it, the people that came from the tech world or are developers do try to understand how ag works. There is a limit. There's only so much you can do. Unless you've experienced certain things, that you can't have the full perspective of it. That is accurate. Still a lot of perception happens like, well, it's this crop, it should work this way. That still happens a lot, don't get me wrong. I would say, though, the people developing these things are more attuned to trying to understand how ag works versus how people in ag understand how technology works. So in a sense, I think you could flip the argument. Now, the problem is there's more people in ag trying to use these systems than there are people developing them. So, you're off kilter here. And that's just how it works. I mean, if it took more people to develop these things for the amount of users, well, nothing would work. And in an odd sense, it almost kind of is that way. When you really grasp all of technology pieces, because ag's just not creating everything it does out of thin air for software. There's a lot of coding programs and protocols and open source XYZ things that are used in the general world. Call it in mapping. We'd use Python and GDAL and MapServe. These are open source things in programming languages. Those are kind of universal. We're not creating those. They weren't created by agriculture. They're created by basically the world to use in its specific purposes. So you're just kind of recasting those things. But in ag, and you build a tractor, it's kind of like, well, it's meant for ag. It kind of works for this. Yes, you can push snow with it. You can put a loader on and lift dirt. You can pull a scraper. Yes, those things exist, but really its core element is agriculture. There's not a lot of those core things that are meant specifically for agriculture. There really isn't. If you do want to get into some of those things, yield data, yeah, that is kind of meant for agriculture. Then again, there is other ways to yield something, but for how we imagine it, it is really for ag. As applied maps and, planter sensors and stuff like that. Yes, those are more in tune to ag. Then again, some of the sensors on those things and the wiring and all that is universal, not meant for it. Sometimes we forget that. Some people in ag forget that things aren't meant for them. They weren't built for them. So I'm not trying to, throw a bunch of shade on agriculture, not trying to understand these things. Plenty do. Most farmers don't, because they're busy too. They got a lot of shit going on. And there's different stressors. Like I've talked about before, there's more concern about the weather in the markets than there is any of this technology, and that's kind of why adoption with some of the stuff is lower until it's just part of the system, part of agriculture, which more and more is. Then it's harder for them to attain this information and care about it as much as people on the other side that are developing it. But it does create a dichotomy of understanding, and it's a reason why the industries and the sectors within them are kind of the way they are, especially with technology. Is how do you bridge that? Like, how do you get one side to understand the other better? Education and seminars and workshops and conferences and shows, sure, all that helps. Newsletter, a blog, what I'm doing right now, podcast or news, sure, all those things help, but there's a limit. So I guess what I'm really just trying to showcase is it's not just about trying to understand how agriculture works when it comes to all this tech. People in ag need to understand better how all this technology works and actually care and try. Because we're almost to a point where technology has reached this precipice and adoption is kind of flatlined in a broader state, I'll say, where unless one of the sides does a lot more, the other side is not going to do anything. In my mind, and this might sound crazy, where we're at with tech and ag, we're for the, call it the majority of larger commoditized base farms, and this even gets into specialty crops. Some of those farms are big for what they are. 100-acre asparagus farm is pretty damn big versus a 100-acre wheat farm, but like some of them are using technology to the kind of the max capacity that they can. You add a new feature and tool, what you've increased, what the usage of it, maybe a fraction of a percent. We've gone, we've done the hockey stick of kind of what it is and all these things, all these tools, to this kind of like, okay, we're beyond you. Tech is beyond what the usage is of what it's capable of doing. It can handle more usage. It can handle more people using the analytics that are there and the answers and the tools and the whatever, the processes. Ag really needs to do better is saying, oh, well, shit, we've been kind of sitting on the pot on this because, all these other factors, trust is probably a big thing, and just feeling like they have to. There's always been this thing. It's like, well, I don't have to use it. It'd be good to use it probably to track these things and bring these new things out there and whatever, but then have to. Is it getting to the point where more in ag, especially farmers and their, more field level advisors, the ones that haven't been in it, that have been kind of like that 80%, that the laggards, will we try to find ways to get them going, and to a point it's just like, fuck it, I'm at where I'm at dealing with my 20% or whatever 5% of people that do it. It's good enough. Until the rest kind of get their head out of their ass, I guess it is what it is. And is there much that the ag tech industry can do to help get them going? I don't know if there is. We've almost kind of maxed out our ability to give a shit about how they do it anymore. And we just gotta kind of stick to the people that do it. And those people will succeed. They'll increase size and acres, and that will hopefully help the bottom line of these different technologies. Do you? That's where AgTech is. That's where precision ag feels like it is. Is that we've been waiting so long. It's like it's a relationship. You know, we've thought, like someone might say, oh, I can change them. I can make them better. I can make them a better person. And really, you just have a toxic relationship with a farmer, maybe, or some ag business. It's like, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. No, it was just stubbornness. And there's this, well, I don't want to change. I don't need to. I've done it this way for 30 years, blah, blah, blah. Most people in ag tech are in a toxic relationship with people in ag. That is reality. I don't know if everyone, I'm going to have to change my exact, what I initially was going to call it, and just say ag is in a toxic, or ag tech is in a toxic relationship with agriculture. Because it's true. If you don't think it's true, you're ignorant, because it is. Ag's messy, a lot of nuance, a lot of weird things. And there's other industries that have these same problems. It's not just ag, but ag is also unique and different in what it is. And it's getting to the point, and investors are getting to this point. Other groups, larger ag businesses, are like, oh, I just don't know how much more I can invest in this process, because people aren't just doing it the way that they should do it. So what is that leaping thing? What gets that other person in the relationship off the couch? I've argued that maybe it's incentive through some government program or some sort of private-public partnership of sorts. Some rule regulation or some new program that if you use X, then you get X back, and then everyone will be happy. Yes, that can help to an extent. People in ag hate regulation. That is, and new rules. So that makes it hard. And then say the government did create some new program, like, hey, if you do variable rate and you prove it, you get $30 an acre through some program. They've attempted this in various ways. Through the CSP program, or maybe that's one of them. There's been various ones. There's the conservation things where it's like, I'll be better, no-till and all this stuff, and then you get all the carbon credit crap and insets, offsets, all that stuff. Hasn't really worked right there either, even though there's incentive for money. So what's the problem? Well, money is probably not really the answer, because for a lot of them, here's the other problem is, okay, say that incentive exists, that you do X, someone's technology is there. We've got there. We've gotten to that plateau of what technology can do, scalability, all that. We can do 90% of what everybody wants, really. The rest is just kind of fluff and cool and new. But we can do most of everything that farmers want. And there's my dog. He's flopping because he's itchy. Anyways. So, okay, someone brings in some incentive. Say it's $30 an acre. Just call it what it is. Well, actually, do a lot of farmers, $30 an acre to share all their data is not worth it. I've had to tell some people recently that they're like, we could pay them $10 an acre if they just do this. I'm like, yeah, they don't give a shit. Because getting that data for you takes more time for that. It's not a natural thing, so they just don't want to do it. And it kind of breaks their heart. They're like, they won't want free money. I'm like, kind of, some of them don't. They don't want to change their practice for that. It's like, well, yeah, changing their practice means maybe changing equipment, changing a whole bunch of other stuff that costs them way more than $10 an acre. So they're like, what's the point? What the risk? It's the risk of changing. So how do you force change? Well, I suppose through some program or money. For a long time, it took a long time to get all farmers, it's like 90% of farmers do crop insurance. That wasn't always the case. What is the early 2000s? I think it was only like 50, 60%. And then through incentives of what it's covering, how it covers it, different rules, different nuance from crop to crop, state to state, timings and things that get creeped up. And then more banks and other institutions like, you need crop insurance, else you're not getting your operating loan. That wasn't always the case. So now it's been this kind of communal thing of bringing it up to get it to that point. How do we do that in the AgTech world? Because right now we're like fighting this fight on a bunch of islands, and then we all kind of want our own piece of the pie, and then we're frustrated, so we're plateaued here. But even if you get others incentivized processes through say the USDA or some government entity, wherever you are, it's going to be hard to regulate and, make sure that they're doing it correctly. And I'm putting quotations on that, as I've seen that before. It's like, if you just provide this map, we'll get you $20 an acre. There's a government program like that for 3 years. You got to do it for 3 years. If you variable rate. A lot of farmers in the area where I lived at the time did it. And the local co-op helped them. But guess what they did? A majority of it was, like 5, maybe 10% actually is like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do this. This is a good incentive. Okay. That's your top percent, people anyways. They're going to try it no matter what. The rest were like, oh, just make me a map. I'm still going to put 150 pounds per acre of nitrogen down. But then, I need to do it in zones. So maybe a 3-zone map and do 145, 150, and 155. So really, just because of the accuracy of how fertilizers actually applied, it's the exact same, because there's a plus and minus degree of accuracy anyways. Didn't do shit. It's just free money for doing a little simple map that you could literally draw on a napkin. And if you can digitize it, or if you just said you did it on a map, I think you just had to give a PDF report of it, like a PDF map saying, I did this here and this there. And it's like, here's $20 an acre. Like, how easy of homework is that? Like, shit. It was the stupidest thing, because I know guys that did that just to get that $20, just to do it. And if you farm, you gotta think of this in scale too. And some of these farms are 5,000 acre farms times $20. Yeah, it's $100,000 for writing, maybe even on a pencil, or just paying someone $1 an acre to make a shoddy map. Why don't other groups and places get this advantage? But then it doesn't help anybody either. It maybe helped that co-op because they did it on 1 million acres. Like, we made $1 million for making shitty shit. But everyone got paid. This is the state of stuff in ag, it feels, especially when it comes to these incentive programs. And the same thing will happen if probably the government gets involved in it. But then maybe it can help bring enough money into the ag tech world where we can get kind of back to where we should, and on a healthier state, and then that makes it better for others to get involved. I don't know. Anyways, I've kind of gone down this crazy meandering roller coaster, but in essence, this whole adage that you have to get ag people to help make the product better. It's like, we've been trying for minimum 3 decades to get them to do it, to understand the process. Surely some have. It's gotten a little better, but it hasn't got to where it needs to go. And there's a lot of factors why, but a lot of it is just you haven't had to. And unless the rule is very strict, they're not going to do it. But then if you bring in all these strict rules, they're going to fight it. Because some people just aren't willing to change. Bringing in that new piece of tech they don't want to do because maybe they're set, they're good, they make their money, they don't care making an extra $50 an acre when they make $200 an acre per year anyway. So they own their land or something and own their equipment. They don't care. What's all that going to all that stuff to just get to that other level? It's like, I'd rather spend my time going to the lake or spend time with my family or something like that. That's what's going on. That's what we're dealing with. AgTech is in a toxic relationship with agriculture. There. That's the gist. Would love your comments on it and your thoughts. I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. Can we meander out of it or make it better? I don't know. It might just be ongoing for quite some time, until something bigger comes along to force it, a black swan event of sorts, which maybe will happen. Probably it's just a long-term toxic relationship, and if you're okay with that, then you fight and you try for it, or you leave and you get out and you change something else. And maybe there's someone in ag that's a less toxic relationship. I think a lot of people learn that farmers are it's kind of a toxic relationship with ag technology. Of course, some can do that fight the big OEMs because that's not really what they're selling. That's kind of an add-on. They're selling their equipment, or they're selling their chemical and all that. So that part they're not in a toxic relationship with. But for the ones that are just strictly doing, they are. So you got to decide: are you willing to take the beating, take the emotional pain of it? And I talked about that in a post before, and I'm drawing on all this and getting long, but this is all very important too, and I can't stop. When I go is to a post I reposted with a comment. It was about people on the ground during war were more broken than people that flew the planes, because the people in the planes during war could control where they put the bomb. They could fly away from the situation. They could get away. Now, some were shot down, yes, and that sucks. But most people on the ground, they experienced it all. They saw it all. They couldn't avoid it. In a sense, if you want to put it, I put it in one perspective of farmers driving tractors. They don't want robots because they want to be controlled. They want to fly the plane. They just want to sit and watch it and see what unfolds necessarily. The people that are dedicated, that just really are AgTech, the softwares, the exact hardware sensors, that's all they do. Yeah, they're the people on the battlefield, and they have to deal with the trenches and the bullets and the blood and the smells and the smoke. While the others that just use AgTech as a side thing, like I said, your OEMs, your inputs, your insurance, these larger entities, they can fly the plane because they're guiding something else. They have a larger swath. They can kind of control their narrative. So that's what it is. That's why people want to sell to the bigger groups, because they can relax and they can take on that general burden. So anyways, I guess it's a decision of whether people want to stay in the toxic relationship or not. And some maybe aren't in one, and they're lucky enough to not be in one within it. But I think a lot of us are, they at least have, and it's affected us. So now I guess the next leap, the next version, some will say it's version 3.0 of trying all this stuff. We're in our third iteration. Maybe we'll get better, but if you ask me, it's going to take the other person to realize the problem and for them to change themselves to kind of get out of it. I see some hope. I think a lot of it just with older generations kind of getting out, transitioning, just dying, unfortunately. That's the way life works. And younger people coming into the fray and needing more technology to cover what's there, because not as many people are coming in that are needed. So technology has to replace some of that. That's probably going to help on some of this. So, anyways, a little longer one this week, but I'll compact it nicely down into the newsletter. And if you want to listen and watch this, then hopefully take something out of it, and we'll see you later. And be prepared potentially for kind of a bigger release of information from myself next week. It's unique, it's different, it's a change. we'll see where it lands. But yeah, part of it is I'm tired of the toxicity of some things I've even been doing. So I'm going to change some. Anyways, thanks for listening if you're still here, and hopefully you've read at least this transcript of things. And if you're still here, if you're even watching, well, hey, cool. Thanks. You're awesome. By the way, how 50 or 100 of you that it is, not a lot of people watch it, looks at it. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.